I paid $12 for her. That's not a figure of speech. 12. Local creds, the kind you toss in a tip jar and forget about. I had a 15-credit chip in my coat and the auctioneer didn't have change, so he just waved his hand and said, "Keep it, take her, get her out of my yard before the smell sets into the floor." That's how it started. $12 and a man who wanted her gone. I didn't know what she was worth. Nobody did. If anybody in that whole rotten station had known, I'd have been shot in the back walking out the door and she'd have been loaded onto a Concord cutter the same night. But they didn't know, and I didn't know. I just couldn't stand the sound she was making. Let me back up. You ever been to a reclamation drift? No, of course you haven't. People with normal lives don't end up at places like Corin's Reach. It sits out past the third belt, where the shipping lanes go thin and the law goes thinner, and the only reason it exists at all is because everything in the galaxy eventually breaks, and somebody has to pick the bones. That somebody was me, has been for 9 years. My name's Del. Del Voss, if you want the whole thing, though nobody out there used last names. Last names were for people who expected to be remembered. I ran a one-man salvage skiff called the Mudlark, ugly little boat, patched in 4 colors, smelled like burnt coolant no matter how many times I scrubbed her. I'd buy dead cargo by weight, strip the useful bits, sell the rest down the line. Hull plate, reactor cores if I got lucky. Once a whole crate of medical synth that set me up for half a year. It wasn't a good life, but it was mine and it was honest enough, which out there counted for something. So that morning, and I say morning, but the Reach didn't have mornings, just the dim cycle and the dimmer cycle. I was at the liquidation block because a hauler had gone derelict 3 weeks back and they'd finally cut it open. Derelict cargo got auctioned cheap. Real cheap. Owners dead or gone, nobody's coming. Sell it fast before the storage fees eat the value. I was hopping for reactor parts. I walked out with her. The block was the usual crowd. 20, maybe 30 buyers, all of them the kind of men who don't look you in the eye and don't want you looking in theirs. There was aggression there, big slug of a thing in a powered chair who bought organics. Bodies mostly. He didn't ask what they'd been before they were bodies. There was a thin woman with a brand on her cheek who I think bought for the pit fights 2 stations over. And there was me near the back, hands in my pockets, half asleep. The auctioneer was a man named Quill. Skinny, twitchy, eyes that never landed anywhere. He ran the block like he was always one bad day from running off it. He sold the easy lots first. Scrap. A pallet of ration bricks gone to mold. A crate of busted nav units that I bid on and lost. Then 2 of his floor boys wheeled out a cage. I want to describe it right, because the way you first see a thing matters. The way it sits in your head later. It was a freight cage. The big kind meant for livestock or heavy machinery, taller than a man and twice as wide. And folded up inside it, and I do mean folded, knees to chest, spine bent wrong, a body crammed into a box that body was never meant to fit, was something I'd never seen before. She was huge. That was the first thing. Even hunched and crushed into that cage, she was clearly enormous, the kind of big that makes your stomach drop a little. The way it drops when you realize the shadow on the water is a whale and not a log. Long limbs. Skin the gray-blue of deep ocean, dull and cracked from dehydration. A face, I could only half see it, turned down and away, but a face with too many planes in it, like someone had carved a person out of slate and not quite finished. And she was making a sound. Low, constant. A kind of humming that wasn't quite a hum, more like the noise a struck wire makes long after you've stopped touching it. It went straight through the floor and up through my boots and sat in my teeth. Half the room flinched away from it. The Grecian turned his chair so the sound hit his back. "What is that?" somebody said. Quill checked his slate. Catalogued as unidentified xeno-organic, recovered from cold storage in the aft hold. Vendor's manifest lists it as freight. He shrugged, this jerky little shrug. Whatever it is, it's alive, it's big, and it's somebody's problem now. Bidding starts at 50. Nobody bid. 40. Nothing, the thing in the cage hummed. Come on, Quill said, and you could hear the nerves under it. Look at the mass on it. Gresham, this is your business. The slug thing made a wet, dismissive sound. I deal in known organics, it said, voice coming out of a translator box on its chair. That is unknown. Unknown means unsellable. Unknown means a buyer asks questions I cannot answer. No. 20 then, 20 and it's yours. The branded woman shook her head. Won't survive a fight, look at it. It's 3 days from dead. And here's the part I think about most. Here's the part I keep turning over. Quill leaned over and looked at her, really looked, at the cracked skin and the bent spine and the way she'd stopped even trying to lift her head, and his face did this thing. Not pity. Worse than pity. It was the look a man gets when he's already decided you're trash and he's just waiting for someone to confirm it. All right, he said. I'll be straight. The disposal fee on a body this size is more than I'll clear all week, so I need her gone, walking, dead, eaten, whatever. Somebody take her off my floor and I'll call it 10 creds. That's a charity number, people. And still, nobody moved. 30 people in that room, and not one of them would spend 10 creds to keep a living thing out of the incinerator. I understood why. I did. Out there you didn't take on what you couldn't sell. A mystery xeno that big could eat your whole month in food alone, assuming you could even figure out what it ate. It could be diseased. It could be dangerous. It could be 100 different kinds of trouble, and trouble was the one thing the Reach had in surplus. I understood all of it. I raised my hand anyway. I still don't have a clean reason. People always want the clean reason, and I don't have one. It wasn't kindness, not the noble kind anyway. I think it was the sound. That humming. I think some animal part of my brain heard it and recognized it. The way you recognize a baby crying even if it's not your baby, even if you've never had a baby, the way the body just knows a thing is in distress and won't let you sit still. Or maybe I was just tired of being the kind of man who sat still. I'll take her, I said. The whole room turned. Quill blinked at me. Was. Yeah. You don't even know what it is. You said 10. He stared at me for a second, and I watched him decide I was an idiot, and I watched him decide he didn't care. 10 it is, he said fast before I could think better of it. He banged the little hammer on the block. Sold the salvager. Get it logged at the desk. I went to pay, pulled my chip. Quill waved at it, no change. Keep the difference, just go, and that's the 12. 10 for her. 2 I overpaid because the man wanted me out the door before I changed my mind. $12. For a person worth a planet. I just didn't know it yet. Getting her aboard the Mudlark was its own small nightmare. The floor boys wouldn't help pass the airlock. Not in the price, one of them said, grinning, and I wanted to put his teeth through the back of his head, but I needed the cage more than I needed the satisfaction. So it was me and a grav sled and a body that, even half dead, outweighed my whole skiff's worth of cargo. I got her into the hold. Barely. The cage didn't fit through the inner door, so I had to open it right there in the lock. And that meant for one long moment I was standing inside arm's reach of a creature 3 times my size that I knew absolutely nothing about. She didn't move. That scared me more than if she'd lunged. Up close she was worse. The cracking in her skin wasn't just dryness, it was deep, fissures that had gone past gray to a sick brown at the edges. Her breathing was this slow, dragging thing with a catch at the top of it. And her eyes, when she finally turned her head just a fraction, just enough, her eyes were open, watching me. They were a pale, washed-out gold, and there was nothing dim about them at all. The body was dying. Whatever was behind the eyes was wide awake, and it was looking at me, and it was waiting to see what I'd do. I've thought a lot about that moment, about what she must have been thinking. Sold for the price of a meal, in a room full of buyers who looked at her like garbage, dragged off by a small, ragged human she'd never seen. She must have thought she was being taken somewhere to die badly. The fights maybe, or the slugs' tables. She held still and let it happen because she didn't have the strength to do anything else. "Hey," I said, "stupid. What do you say?" "Hey, I'm not gonna hurt you, okay? I don't even know what you are, but I'm not gonna hurt you." The eyes tracked me, no chain. "You need water," I said, because that part I was sure of. Anything that breathes and bleeds needs water. Hold on. I left her there in the open lock and went and got the biggest container I had, a 40-liter coolant drum I'd rinsed out twice, filled it from the recycler and dragged it back. Set it down in front of her. Stepped well clear. She looked at the water. She looked at me. And then, slow, so slow, like every joint in her body was full of broken glass, she unfolded one long arm and dipped a hand the size of a dinner plate into the drum and brought it to her mouth and drank. She drank the whole 40 liters. I refilled it twice. By the third drum, the cracks in her skin had started to close, actually close, the brown edges going gray, going blue, like watching a riverbed flood, and the dragging catch went out of her breathing. And the humming, that awful struck wire sound, finally stopped. In the quiet that followed, she looked at me again. And this time the gold eyes weren't just watching. They were thinking. I'll tell you the thing I figured out fast, and the thing it took me much longer to understand. The fast thing, she was smart. Smarter than me probably in ways I couldn't measure. By the second day she'd watched me work the recycler enough times to do it herself, those huge careful hands managing my fiddly little controls better than I did. By the third day she'd started copying my words, not parrot copying, sorting them. She'd point at the water drum and say water and point at me and wait, and I'd say Del, and she'd say it back, Del, getting the shape of it right on the second try. The slow thing took longer. The slow thing was that she decided to trust me, and I had no idea what that decision had cost her, or what it meant, or who in the wide black galaxy I had just made myself responsible for. Her name, and it took me a week to get it, because the first sounds she made for it weren't sounds my throat could make, was something like Surin Velora. The whole thing was a chord more than a word, 3 notes layered together, and when she said it the whole seemed to hum along. I couldn't say it. I tried. She watched me mangle it for a while with what I swear was amusement, and then she put one finger to her own chest and said, slow and clear in my own language now, Sura. You say Sura. Sura, I said. Yes, a pause, good, Del. So that was us. Del and Sura in a patched-up salvage skiff in the dead end of the third belt, the 2 least likely friends in the galaxy. I didn't know yet that friend was the smallest, safest word for what I'd walked into. Here's what I knew about Sura in those first weeks, pieced together from broken talk and a lot of pointing. She came from somewhere far. Not far like the next system, far like the kind of distance that doesn't fit in your head. When I showed her my nav charts, she stared at them for a long time and then put one finger right at the edge, off the map, into the black past the last labeled star, and held it there and didn't say anything. She'd been taken. That part she made very clear very early with a flatness in her voice that told me more than the words did. Not bought, not lost, taken. There'd been a ship and there'd been others of her kind on it. She held up her hands, opened and closed them, many, and then closed them and didn't open them again, and I understood that the many were gone. And then there'd been cold. The cold storage. She'd been put under for the journey and woken up alone in a freight cage in a room full of men, deciding whether she was worth 10 credits. How long, I asked her once, how long were you cold? She didn't have my numbers yet. So she did the thing she did when words ran out. She reached over, slow, asking permission with her eyes, and she touched 2 fingers very lightly to my temple. And I saw it. I don't know how to explain it, and I've stopped trying. It wasn't words and it wasn't pictures exactly. It was knowing. For about 3 seconds I knew what she knew, the way you know a dream right before it fades. A long dark, a cold so total it wasn't even cold anymore, just nothing, and time stacking up in the nothing, year on year on year, more years than I could hold. She took her fingers away. I was sitting on the floor. I don't remember sitting down. Long, she said quietly in my language. I was cold a long time, Del. I didn't ask again. I should have known something was wrong sooner. The signs were there. I just wasn't looking at them right because I was a salvage man who'd never had anything worth protecting, and you don't learn to watch for thieves until you've got something to steal. The first sign was the questions. 3 weeks after I bought her, I put in at a fuel depot called Hask to top off the Mudlark and trade some hull plate. Routine stop. Done it 50 times. I left Sura aboard, obviously. You don't walk an unidentified Xeno the size of a cargo loader through a public depot and went to do my business. The depot master, a tired old hand named Fair who'd known me for years, was acting strange, asking things he never asked. Where'd I come in from? What was I hauling? Had I been to Corin's Reach lately? I figured he was just bored or fishing for a cut of whatever I was carrying. I gave him half answers and thought nothing of it. I should have thought everything of it. Because 2 days out from Hask, I picked up a tail. It was subtle, a blip on the long scope that held my heading a little too well, a little too long. Most traffic out there drifts and changes. Everybody's going somewhere different and the lanes are wide. But this one sat right in my wake, matching my course corrections with a delay just long enough to look natural. I changed heading twice to be sure. Both times after a beat it followed. I felt the cold go down my back. I went down to the hold. Sura was sitting in her corner. She'd more or less claimed a corner, padded it out with the spare insulation blankets I'd given her, and she looked up the second I came down the ladder. She always knew when something had changed in me. I think she read it in how I moved. "There's a ship behind us," I said, following. She went very still. Then she rose, and even after weeks I never got used to the size of her unfolding, the way she filled the hold, the way I had to remember not to step back. She crossed to the hull and put one hand flat against it, like she could feel through the metal. "What kind?" she said. "I don't know, it's keeping its distance, won't answer hails." She was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke her voice had changed. Lower, older somehow. The voice of someone remembering something they'd hoped not to. "Show me," she said. I brought her up to the cockpit, barely fit her. She had to fold down into the second seat with her knees up by the console, and I put the long scope on the main display. The blip, the track, the tidy little delay. Sura looked at it for maybe 10 seconds. Then she said a word I didn't know. A short, hard word in her own tongue, the way you'd say a curse or a name you were afraid of. "Korth," she said. "What's Korth?" She turned and looked at me, and for the first time since I'd pulled her out of that cage, I saw fear in her face. Not the dull animal fear of the auction block. A specific fear. A knowing fear. "Not what," she said. "Who, the ones who took me?" She looked back at the display, at the patient blip in our wake. "They found me, they found the trail." She closed her eyes. "Del, I am sorry, I am so sorry. I have brought them to you. I want to be honest about what I felt right then, because the brave version would be a lie and you'd smell it. What I felt was, I should put her off the ship." It went through my head clean and fast and ugly. I was a salvage man. I had a skiff held together with weld tape and stubbornness, and a debt to a chandler 2 stations back that I still hadn't cleared. Whatever Sura was, whatever the Korth were, this was not my fight. I'd paid 12 creds. 12. The math on 12 creds does not come out to die for a stranger. I could find a station, set her down, fuel up, and run the other way, and in a month it'd be a story I told over a drink. You'll never believe the thing I bought once. That's what went through my head. And then Sura, who could read me, who always could, looked at my face and saw all of it. Every cheap calculating bit of it. And she didn't get angry. That was the worst part. She just nodded slow, like she'd expected nothing else. Like the auction block had taught her exactly what to expect from small, ragged men. "You can leave me at the next station," she said quietly. "I will not blame you. You have already given me more than I was owed." And something in me just turned over. Because here's the thing about being treated like garbage your whole life. I'd done it. I'd been the body nobody bid on in my own way. I'd had people look at me with that exact look Quill gave her, the "you're already trash, I'm just waiting for confirmation" look. And I knew what it did to you, the slow way it taught you to expect the worst from everyone, the way you started doing the math on your own worth and coming up with 12 credits. And I was about to confirm it for her. I was about to be one more thing in the universe that proved she was right to expect nothing. "No," I said. She looked at me. "No," I said again, and my hands were shaking on the console and I gripped it so she wouldn't see. "I'm not putting you off. Sit tight. We're gonna lose them." The fear in her face cracked into something else, something I didn't have a name for then. I have one now. It was the look of someone who'd given up on being chosen, getting chosen anyway. "Del," she said, "you don't understand what they are." "Then tell me while I fly," I said, and put the mudlark into a hard burn for the only thing out there that might save us, the Scarn maze, a debris field 3 hours ahead, where the law didn't reach and a small, ugly boat had every advantage in the galaxy. "Tell me everything." She told me. And it was so much bigger than I was ready for. The Korth, she said, weren't a species. They were a thing built by species, an old, cold institution, a kind of galactic clearinghouse for the rare and the valuable, with no flag and no homeworld and no law above its own ledgers. They didn't conquer. They didn't need to. They acquired. Anything in the galaxy that was one of a kind, anything that couldn't be replaced, a relic, a knowledge, a creature, a person, the Korth would find a way to put it in a cage and carry it off to wherever they kept their treasures. They'd been doing it for longer than my species had had a written language. "And they took you," I said. "Why, what are you?" She was quiet for a long time. We were into the edge of the maze by then, the debris starting to wheel past the viewport, and I was flying on nerve and instinct, and she sat folded in the little seat beside me with her huge hands open on her knees. "My people," she said finally, "do not have many. We do not breed as yours do, fast many. We are few, we are slow, we live a very long time and we are very few." She looked at her hands. "And we are tied to a world, one world, do you understand? Not living on a world, tied to it. We are part of how it lives. The forests, the seas, the weather, they answer to us and we to them. We are the," she searched for the word, "the caretakers, the keepers. Without us the world goes quiet, with us it sings." I didn't say anything. I was starting to understand, and I didn't like where it was going. "There were others taken with me," she said. "I told you, many and then none." Her voice didn't break, but it went very thin. "I was the last they had, and I think, Del, I think I may be the last there is. Because if they took all of us, then on my world right now there is no one to keep it. And a world with no keeper," she closed her hands, "dies, slowly, but it dies." The debris wheeled past. Somewhere behind us the Korth ship hung in our wake, patient as a tide. "So what you're telling me," I said slowly, "is that you're not worth a planet. You are a planet, you're the whole thing, the last piece of a whole living world." She looked at me. The gold eyes were wet. "Yes," she said, "that is what I am worth to them. A world, that is why they will not stop." She reached over and, gentle as ever, touched 2 fingers to the back of my hand. "And it is why you should have left me, Del. Because no one stops the Korth. No one ever has. And now they know your ship and your face, and they will follow you to the last dark in the sky to get me back." I looked at her hand on mine. Plate-sized, ocean blue, careful. The hand of the last keeper of a dying world that nobody in a room of 30 had been willing to spend 10 creds to save. I should have been terrified, part of me was. But a bigger part of me, a part I didn't know I had until right then, was something else entirely. Something hot and clear and steady. Because I'd spent 9 years being the man nobody bid on. And I had finally found the one thing in the whole galaxy worth not being that man for. "Sura," I said, "hold on to something." And I took us into the maze. The Scarn maze is where ships go to disappear, one way or the other. It's the bones of an old battle, they say, some war so far back nobody alive remembers who fought it. Whole fleets dead out there, smashed into a field of wreckage 40,000 clicks deep, drifting and tumbling and grinding against each other in the dark. No working nav beacons. No charts that stay true because the field shifts. Big ships can't go in, they're too slow to dodge, too wide to thread. The Korth ship behind us was a cruiser, sleek and heavy and built for the open lanes. The Mudlark was a junk skiff built by a desperate man, for diving exactly this kind of grave. It was the one place in the galaxy where being small and ugly, and patched together made me the most dangerous boat in the sky. I killed the running lights. I killed the transponder. I dropped us in along a tumbling spar of some ancient dreadnought's hull, matched its spin, and let the wreckage swallow us whole. Behind us, the Korth cruiser slowed at the edge of the field. I watched it on the scope, watched it hesitate the way a big predator hesitates at the mouth of a cave it's too big to enter. Then it did something that turned my blood to ice water. It launched. 2 smaller craft peeled off the cruiser's belly and came into the field after us. Fast, agile, hunter-killers built lean, built to do exactly what I was doing, thread the bones and run down whatever ran. They have small ships, Sura said. She was watching the scope over my shoulder, her breath warm at my ear. Like yours. Yeah, I said, my mouth was dry, but they don't know the maze like I do. That was a lie. I'd been into the Scarn exactly 4 times in 9 years, and every time I'd come out swearing never again. But you say the lie out loud because the person beside you needs it, and because sometimes saying it makes it just true enough. I flew. I flew like I have never flown before or since. Down through the ribs of dead ships, around tumbling reactor cores still hot after 1,000 years, through gaps that the proximity alarm screamed I would never fit through, and that I fit through anyway, paint scraping, hull groaning. Sura held the grab bars and didn't make a sound. The 2 hunters came after us, and they were good, God. They were good, better pilots than me, faster boats than mine. And the only thing I had on them was that I was willing to die in the next 30 seconds, and they wanted to live long enough to collect. That and the maze itself. There's a place deep in the field the divers call the throat. A current, not water, but the grind of the wreckage itself. A slow river of moving steel where 2 big sections of the field rub past each other in opposite directions. Get the timing wrong and it closes on you like a fist. Get it right, and you slip through a gap that's only open for about 4 seconds out of every 90. I'd never run the throat. I'd seen it once from a safe distance, and I'd turned around and gone home and had 2 drinks and not talked for a day. I ran it now. When I say down, I told Sura, I need you off the bars and braced flat on the deck. The grav's gonna cut. Understand? Understand. I lined us up on the throat, watched the grind, counted the rhythm of it, close, open, felt for the pulse of a thing 40,000 clicks of dead metal had no business having. The hunters were right behind me now, close enough that I could see their thruster glow in my aft camera, close enough that one of them opened up with a hull cutter and put a line of molten scars down my port side. Sura cried out, not in fear. The ship had screamed and she'd felt it like her own skin. Close open. Down, I shouted and cut the grav, and dove the Mudlark into a gap in a river of moving steel that was already starting to close. For 4 seconds the universe was nothing but noise and the screech of wreckage closing over us, and Sura's body slamming flat to the deck and my own scream tearing out of me. And then we were through. Out the far side into a pocket of clear black, tumbling, half my systems redlining, port-hull venting atmosphere I sealed off with a slap at the bulkhead controls. Behind us the throat closed. The first hunter, too close on my tail, too committed, didn't make the gap. I'll spare you, it was fast. The maze doesn't leave much. The second one was smarter. It pulled up, aborted the run, hung back at the mouth of the throat, and through my one working camera I watched it sit there, watched the pilot make the math I'd refused to make, watched it decide its life was worth more than its catch. It turned around and went back to its cruiser. And in the sudden ringing quiet, with the mudlark groaning around us and my hands locked white on the controls and my whole body shaking so hard I could barely breathe, I heard Sura, flat on the deck behind me, start to laugh. It was a strange sound, 3 notes layered like her name, a sound I'd never heard her make. It filled the cockpit and it filled the ringing in my ears, and after a second, God help me, I was laughing too, the wild, ragged laugh of a man who should be dead and isn't. "You flew us through the closing dark," she said when she could speak. She pulled herself up slow and put one huge hand on my shoulder, and it covered the whole of it, warm and heavy and real. "Del, you flew us through." "Yeah," I said. I was crying and laughing at the same time, and I didn't care. "Yeah, we made it. We made it, Sura. I looked at the scope. The cruiser was still there, patient, at the edge of the field, waiting for us to come out the other side the way a tide waits, the way it always waits. The hunters had failed, but the Korth hadn't stopped. The Korth never stopped. She'd told me that, and I hadn't really heard it, not until I saw that big cold ship sitting in the dark with all the time in the universe, and understood that getting away from them once wasn't getting away. The laugh died in my throat. "They're still there," Sura said softly. She'd seen it too. "Yeah. They will always be there." She took her hand off my shoulder, sat back, and the fear came back into her face, but quieter now, sadder, the fear of someone who'd let herself hope for 4 whole seconds and was now putting the hope away again. "This is what I tried to tell you. You can outfly them once, twice, but you have a small ship and 1 life, and they have many ships and forever. In the end they win. They always win. It is what they are for." I sat there in the wreck of my skiff and looked at the cold, patient ship on the scope, and I felt the old math creeping back. The 12-credit math. The "this is not your fight" math. And then I looked at Sura, the last keeper of a dying world, sold for the price of a meal, laughing for the first time in maybe 1,000 years, and then folding the laugh away because she'd learned not to keep nice things. And I thought about a world somewhere out past the edge of every chart I owned, going quiet, going still, the forests falling silent and the seas going gray, waiting for someone who was never coming back. "Maybe they always win," I said. She looked at me. "But they've never had to beat a human before." "But they've never had to beat a human before." I said it, and the second it was out of my mouth I felt like a fool. It was the kind of thing a man says in a story, out loud in the wreck of a leaking skiff, with a cold cruiser sitting patient in the dark waiting to take everything from me. It sounded thin. It sounded like a boy whistling in a cellar. But Sura didn't laugh. She looked at me for a long moment. And then she did something she hadn't done before. She reached over with both hands, those huge careful hands, and she took my face between them, gentle, the way you'd hold something you'd already broken once and didn't want to break again. And she looked at me the way I imagined she'd once looked at her whole world. "No," she said softly, "they have not." And I understood in that look that she'd decided to stop telling me to run, that she'd decided to let herself be saved, which sounds like a small thing. It is not a small thing. For someone who'd had hope beaten out of them as thoroughly as the Korth had beaten it out of her, deciding to hope again is the bravest thing there is. I owed it to her not to waste it, so I made myself think. Here's the trap I was in, laid out plain. The cruiser couldn't follow me into the maze. Too big. So as long as I stayed in the field I was safe, but I couldn't stay in the field forever. My port hull was venting. Half my systems were redlined. I had maybe 2 days of air with the leak, less if I had to burn hard. The maze had no fuel, no supplies, nothing but the bones of dead ships. Stay, and I died slow. Leave, and the cruiser took us the moment I cleared the wreckage, and the cruiser knew it. That's why it was being patient. It didn't have to chase me, it just had to wait. Time was on its side the way it had always been on the Korth's side. Forever, Sura had said, they have forever a small ship. 1 life, 2 days of air. I sat there and I turned it over and over, and every way I turned it, it came up the same. There was no flying out of this. Speed wouldn't save me. Tricks wouldn't save me. The one trick I had, the maze, was also the cage I was now stuck inside. I needed something else. I needed to change the shape of the problem. and slowly, sitting in the dark, listening to my ship hiss its air out into the void, I started to see it. Not a way to fight the cruiser. I couldn't fight it. My skiff had a single mining laser meant for cutting hull plate, and the cruiser had armor 1,000 times thicker than anything that laser could touch. Going gun to gun was a joke, but I wasn't a soldier. I'd never been a soldier. I was a salvage man. And a salvage man doesn't beat a bigger ship by being stronger. He beats it by knowing what's already dead and how to make it fall on you. Sura, I said, I need you to tell me about them. Not what they are, how they think. When they hunt, when they wait, what are the rules? Something built that old, that careful, something that keeps ledgers, it's got rules, it's got procedure. What are they? She thought about it. I could see her sorting through whatever memory she had of them, and I hated to make her go back there, but she did it. Are careful, she said. Above all, they do not risk the prize. This is their first law. The thing acquired must arrive whole. A relic chipped is a relic worth less. A creature damaged is a creature worth less. She looked at me. I am worth a world only if I arrive alive and whole. They will not fire on your ship if there is a chance the fire kills me. They lost the hunters in the throat. They will not send more into the field because every craft lost is risk, and they hate risk. They will wait at the edge. They will wait for me to come to them, and when I do, they will take me gently, with care, because a damaged keeper is a ruined world. I felt the first piece click into place. So they won't shoot me, I said slowly, as long as you're aboard. Not while I am aboard, and not while there is doubt. They will try to disable, to board, to take me out alive, but they will not destroy the ship that holds the prize. A pause. Why? Because that means I get to choose the ground, I said. They can't just blow me out of the sky. They have to come and get you, carefully. And careful is slow, and slow is something I can use. I was on my feet now, moving, the plan building itself in my head faster than I could keep up. 9 years of salvage. 9 years of knowing exactly how a dead ship comes apart, where the stresses live, what falls and what holds. I'd spent my whole working life learning the anatomy of wreckage. I was about to put a master class to use. There's a section of the field, I said, near the throat, the aft third of that old dreadnought we rode in on. It's the biggest piece of wreck in this whole part of the maze, kilometers of it, and it's barely holding together. I scoped it once years back, thought about stripping it. The reactor's still in there. Dead, but the containment failed slow, and there's a pocket of never mind the details. The point is, that whole section is one good shove from coming apart. It's a landslide waiting to happen. It just needs a trigger. Sura watched me, not understanding yet, but trusting. I'm going to bring the cruiser in, I said. All the way in, past the edge, into the field, into the narrow part by the throat where it's too big to maneuver. And then I'm going to drop that whole dead dreadnought on top of it. She stared at me. You said the cruiser will not enter the field. It won't, I agreed. Not chasing me, too much risk. I smiled, and it wasn't a nice smile. It was the smile of a man who's finally found the one move on the board. So I'm not going to make it chase me. I'm going to make it come and get its prize, carefully, slowly, exactly the way they always do. And I told her the rest. She didn't like it. I want that on the record. Because the rest of the plan had a hole in it, and the hole was her, and she saw it before I'd finished talking. The only way to bring the cruiser into the field was bait it couldn't refuse. The Korth would not enter the maze for a skiff. They'd wait that out. But they would enter carefully, committedly, deep. For the one thing they'd crossed the galaxy and waited 1,000 years for. They'd enter for Sura. She had to be the bait. She had to be out there, visible, alone, in a place the cruiser had to come into the deep field to reach. And I had to be far enough away, hidden in the wreckage, to fire the shot that brought the dreadnought down without bringing it down on her. You are asking me to stand in the open, she said quietly, and trust a human with a mining laser to drop a mountain near me and not on me. Yeah, I said, that's exactly what I'm asking. If you miss, I won't miss. Del. She said my name the way you'd steady a child. If you miss, I die, and the world dies with me, and you will have killed the last of my people with your own hand. Do you understand the weight of what you are asking me to give you? I did. God, I did. I'd never held a weight like that in my life. The whole worth of a living world, the last of an ancient line, placed in my hands, my cracked, grease-stained, salvage man's hands that an hour ago I'd been ready to use to push her off my ship. I understand, I said. And I'm asking anyway. Because the only other plan is we sit here and run out of air, and they take you whole and easy in 2 days, and the world dies anyway slower. This way at least we get to choose. She was quiet for a long, long time, then she said, "On my world there is a thing we believe, that nothing of worth is ever kept by holding it tight. That worth is only real when it is given freely and freely risked." She looked at her open hands. "I have been held for 1,000 years. Carried in cages, acquired and stored and counted. No one has let me do anything in all that time." She looked up at me and the gold eyes were burning. "You are the first one in 1,000 years to ask me to choose my own risk, to trust me with my own life." A slow breath. "How can I say no to the only one who ever asked?" "Sura, I will be your bait del Vos," she said, and she smiled, and it was the saddest and the bravest thing I have ever seen. "Do not miss. Tell you how we did it, because the doing is the part that matters. I found the spot, a wide pocket in the deep field, ringed on one side by the great dead bulk of the dreadnought's aft section. All those kilometers of failing hull hanging over the open space like a cliff over a valley. There was a maintenance spar jutting out into the pocket, a long flat finger of old hull plate, broad as a city street. That's where she'd stand, out in the open, visible to anything looking. Lit up, even I rigged a salvage beacon to her, a steady pulse, the kind that says here, here, here I am. And then I took the mudlark, venting and groaning, and I tucked her into a crevice in the dreadnought's flank, 1/2 kilometer up the cliff, where I had a clean line down on the one stress point I'd found years ago and never forgotten. The place where the dead reactor's failing containment met the great spine of the hull, the keystone of the whole rotten structure. One good cut there, and the slow landslide that the dreadnought had been threatening for 1,000 years would finally let go. I had one mining laser. One shot, really, before the recoil and the heat blowout took the gun. I'd have to make it count. Then I sent the signal. I dropped my transponder masking. Just for a second. Just long enough for the cruiser to catch a ghost of the mudlark's signature deep in the field, near a steady salvage beacon pulsing here, here, here. Long enough to paint the picture. The skiff had finally broken, the salvage man had finally given up, and the prize was sitting out in the open, waiting to be collected. Then I went dark and I waited. It took 11 minutes. I counted every one. 11 minutes of watching the cruiser sit at the edge of the field, and then, slow, so slow, the way a glacier moves, it began to come in. I want you to understand how careful it was. It crept. It nosed into the field along the widest channels, sensors sweeping, easing its great bulk past the tumbling wreckage with a delicacy that something that size should not have been able to manage. It was being exactly what Sura had promised, careful, committed, unwilling to risk the prize. It wanted Sura whole. So it came for her gently on a course that took it right into the pocket, right under the cliff, right where I needed it. And there she stood, out on the spar, lit up, alone. The last keeper of a dying world, standing in the open in the dark, trusting a salvage man not to drop a mountain on her head. I have never in my life held so still. I lined the laser on the keystone and I held it, and I watched that cruiser slide into the pocket, and I waited for the angle, the one angle where the landslide would come down across the open space, between the cliff and the spar, onto the cruiser, away from Sura, and I prayed to nothing in particular and I held. The cruiser stopped over the spar. Its belly opened. A collection craft began to descend towards Sura, slow, gentle, reaching out with grav arms to take its prize. Now I thought, no, not yet. Wait for the cruiser to commit. Wait till it can't pull back. I waited. The collection craft was halfway down. The cruiser hung full in the pocket, deep in the field, kilometers from open space, exactly where a thing that big had no business being. It had broken its own first law. It had taken the risk. Because the prize was worth it. Because to the Korth, Sura had always been worth any risk. That was the thing they never understood. Worth isn't something you can hold by gripping it tight. Now, I fired. The laser cut into the keystone, and the keystone screamed, and the whole rotten 1,000-year structure of the dreadnought's aft section finally let go. You don't hear it in space. That's the strange thing. The most enormous violence I have ever witnessed, and it came down in total silence. Kilometers of dead hull, the failed reactor, the whole great cliff of it, it sheared off the spine and it came down across the pocket in a slow, silent avalanche of steel. exactly the way I'd seen it in my head, exactly along the line I'd cut it to fall. Down and across. Between the cliff and the spar, onto the cruiser, the Korth saw it coming. Of course they did. They were careful, they were watching, they had 1,000 years of caution wired into everything they did. The cruiser tried to pull back, I saw its thrusters flare, saw it try to claw its way back out of the pocket the way it had crept in. But it was too big and it was too deep, and slow is slow whether you're coming in careful or fleeing for your life. It had spent its caution coming in gentle. It had no speed left to spend getting out. The landslide took it. I won't pretend I watched the whole thing. The blowout from my own laser had already started cooking my crevice. The gun went up. The recoil slammed the mudlark hard into the hull behind me. Half my remaining systems died at once. The last clear image I have is the cruiser, that great cold patient thing that had crossed the galaxy and waited 1,000 years, vanishing under a silent mountain of the very wreckage it had been too proud and too careful to enter. And then I was tumbling, my ship dying around me, fighting the controls with everything I had left, trying to claw clear of the edge of the avalanche before it took me to. I got clear. Barely. I'll spare you the details of the next 20 minutes. They were ugly and they were loud inside my own head, and they involved more prayer than a man like me has any right to. But I got the mudlark clear and I limped her around the wreckage, and I came up alongside the spar, and Sura was still standing there. Untouched. The landslide had come down exactly where I'd cut it between her and the cliff, never within 100 meters of the spar. She stood there in the dark with her salvage beacon still pulsing here, looking at the silent mountain of steel that had buried the thing that had owned her for 1,000 years. I opened the lock. She came aboard. She had to fold herself down through the door, the way she always did. And when she was in, when she was standing in my battered hold with her knees up by her ears in that ridiculous way, she looked at me, and I looked at her, and neither of us said anything for a long time. Then she crossed the hold in one step and she folded herself down around me, wrapped me up in those huge ocean blue arms, and she held on. And I held on back. And the two of us stood there in the dark in the dead end of the third belt, the salvage man and the last keeper of a dying world, shaking, alive. Holding on. You did not miss, she said into the top of my head. No, I said, my voice cracked clean in half. No, I didn't. We sat in the maze for a day while I patched the mudlark enough to limp her out. Sura helped. By then she could work half my systems better than I could, and we talked about what came next, because here's the thing nobody tells you about saving someone. The dramatic part ends and then there's just the next part. The quiet part. The what now? Your world, I said. If you're really the last keeper, if it's really dying for one of you, then we have to, yes, she said simply. We have to go home. I looked at her. Sura, I don't even know where home is. You pointed off the edge of every chart I own. I've got a half-dead salvage skiff and 12 credits of net worth and a hold full of patches. I laughed, helpless. I'm a guy who buys broken things and sells them for scrap. I don't know how to cross the galaxy. She smiled. And she did the thing she'd done once before, weeks ago, that first time she reached over slow, asking with her eyes, and she touched 2 fingers to my temple. And I saw it, not the cold dark this time. This time she showed me home. I saw a world. Green going to blue going to silver, oceans you could fall into forever, forests that moved like they were breathing because they were breathing, mountains with snow on them and rivers running down. And I felt the quiet, the wrongness. A world holding its breath, waiting, the song gone out of it, the seas going still and the forests slowing and everything everywhere just waiting for the keeper to come home and wake it back up. And I saw the way. She showed me the way. Not coordinates, her people didn't think in coordinates, but a way of knowing the path, a pull, like the pull a migrating bird feels, a string tied between her and the green-blue-silver world that had never once stopped tugging in all her 1,000 cold years. She took her fingers away. Know the way home, she said. I have always known the way home. I only ever needed someone willing to take me. She looked at me, at my battered ship, at my grease-stained hands, at all 12 credits worth of me. Will you take me home, Del Vos? And I thought about it. I want to be honest, I thought about it. About the danger, about the distance, about the fact that I'd be flying off the edge of every map I owned in a ship held together with weld tape and luck, toward a world full of God knew what, on the word of a creature I'd known for a handful of weeks. I thought about all of it, and then I thought about what I'd been before she came aboard. A man nobody bid on. A man doing the math on his own worth and coming up with scrap value. 9 years of buying broken things because broken things were the only things that ever came to me. And here was the one unbroken thing. The one thing of real worth I'd ever held, asking me to take her home. Yeah, I said. Yeah, Sura, I'll take you home. It took us 2 years. I'm not going to tell you the whole of it here. That's a longer story than I've got the breath for tonight, and parts of it I don't have words for at all. But I'll give you the shape. We sold everything I had to fuel the trip. We crossed the open lanes, and then the thin lanes, and then we crossed the dark past the last labeled star, off the edge of every chart, into the black that the maps just call unknown, because nobody who'd gone there had ever come back to fill it in. We ran out of food twice and nearly out of air once. We patched the Mudlark so many times she stopped being the ship I'd started with. By the end she was more patched than original, more Sura's work than mine. A ship rebuilt the way you rebuild anything you mean to keep. I learned her language, the parts of it my throat could manage. She learned mine, all of it, better than me. We argued. We laughed. We sat in long silences that didn't need filling. Somewhere out in the unknown dark, I stopped being a salvage man with a cargo and she stopped being a prize with a rescuer, and we became just two people, going home together. I don't have a cleaner word for it than that, and I've stopped looking for one. And one day, 2 years out, the pull she'd carried for 1,000 years finally tightened to nothing, and we came over the curve of a sun I had no name for, and there it was, green going to blue going to silver, exactly the way she'd shown me. Oceans you could fall into forever, and quiet, so terribly quiet, the whole world holding its breath, waiting. I set the Mudlark down in a valley by a still gray river, under forests that had gone slow and silent, and I opened the lock, and Sura stepped out onto her own world for the first time in 1,000 years. I won't try to describe what happened then. I was there, and I still can't describe it. She knelt down and she put both hands flat on the ground and she said something in her own tongue, 3 notes layered like her name, and the world woke up. I felt it before I saw it. Felt it through my boots, the way I'd felt her humming back in that auction hall a lifetime ago, but this wasn't distress. This was the opposite of distress. This was a world taking its first breath in 1,000 years. The river started to run blue. The forests all around us, as far as I could see, came alive, every leaf turning at once toward a keeper who'd finally come home. The wind picked up and it had a sound in it, a low layered sound, and I realized after a second that the whole world was singing, and it was singing her name, and it was singing God help me, it was singing mine, too, tangled up in hers, the human who'd brought the keeper home. She'd told me that first week, that with the keeper the world sings. She hadn't told me what it would do to a man to stand in the middle of that song and know he'd put it there. 12 credits and a broken ship and a refusal to be the kind of man who sits still, and a whole world singing. I stayed. People always ask me that, the few people I've ever told. They ask if I went back. Back to what? Corin's Reach. The reclamation drifts. The man nobody bid on, buying broken things by weight in the dead end of the third belt. No. I stayed. Sura's people, there were more, it turned out. Not many. She'd been wrong about being the very last, though only just. A handful had hidden when the Korth came, deep in the silver seas, too few to wake the world but enough to keep the memory of it. When Sura came home and the song came back, they came up out of the deep, and there was a reunion I had no business witnessing and witnessed anyway and wept through every minute of it. They didn't know what to make of me at first. A small, ragged, loud thing, the wrong shape, the wrong size, the wrong everything. But Sura told them what I'd done and how, and for how little, and they decided that a creature who'd spend his whole worth and risk his one life for the price of a meal was a creature worth keeping. So I kept the world too, in my own small way. I'm no keeper, I'll never sing a river blue. But I know how things break, and I know how to fix them, and it turns out a world coming back to life after 1,000 years has a great deal that needs fixing. There's always work for a salvage man, even on a living world, especially on a living world, and I had Surah. I'll leave it there. Some things aren't for telling to a crowd, so that's the story. The whole of it near enough. I paid $12 for her, in a room full of 30 people who wouldn't spend 10. Gresham who bought bodies, the woman who bought fighters, the auctioneer who just wanted the smell out of his floor, they all looked at the biggest, rarest, most valuable thing any of them would ever see in their whole lives, and they saw garbage. They saw a disposal fee. They saw a body 3 days from dead. I've thought a long time about why I was the only one who raised a hand, and I've decided it's this. It's not that I saw what she was worth. I didn't. Nobody did. I had no idea I was buying a planet. I thought I was buying trouble I couldn't afford. It's that I knew what it felt like to be the thing nobody bids on. And when you've been that, when you've sat in the cage and heard the room go quiet around your own worth, you can't sit still when you hear that sound coming from someone else. You just can't. Something in you won't let you. The rarest thing in the galaxy was sitting in a cage in front of 30 people, and not one of them could see it, because not one of them ever learned to look at a broken thing and ask what it might be worth to someone who loved it. I learned that the hard way. 9 years of buying broken things. Turns out it was the only education I ever needed. People hear this story and they think the lesson is about luck. About how I got lucky, how I happened to buy a fortune for 12 credits, how I won some cosmic lottery. And I let them think it mostly because it's easier. But that's not the lesson. The lesson is the other way around. She wasn't worth a planet because of what she was. Plenty of people knew what she was or could have found out, and they'd have sold her to the court and slept fine. She was worth a planet because somebody finally treated her like she was worth one. Worth isn't in the thing. It never was. It's in the hand that's willing to reach for it. I reached for the thing nobody else would touch, and it turned out to be a whole world. That's it. That's the story. The next time you're standing in a room full of people, and everybody's looking away from the same thing, the thing that's making that sound, the thing that's 3 days from dead, the thing nobody will spend 10 credits to save, look again. You never know what $12 might buy.